Once, in a quiet village, nestled between misty mountains, there lived a young man named Hiro. Hiro was known for his restless mind. He was constantly plagued by worries, doubts, and endless thoughts that swirled like a storm in his head. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't find peace. One day, desperate for answers, he decided to seek out the wisdom of a renowned Zen master who lived in a monastery high in the mountains. After a long and arduous journey, Hiro arrived at the monastery. The Zen master, an old man with a calm presence and gentle eyes, greeted him. Hiro bowed deeply and said, "Master, I cannot control my mind. It is like a wild horse, running in all directions. Please, teach me how to tame it." The master nodded and said, "Very well. Follow me." He led Hiro to a small, tranquil pond at the edge of the monastery. The water was so still that it perfectly reflected the sky and the surrounding trees. The master handed Hiro an empty bucket and said, "Use this bucket to stir the water in the pond." Confused but obedient, Hiro took the bucket and began to stir the water. The once calm surface became turbulent, and the reflections disappeared into chaos. The master said, "Keep stirring." Hiro continued, growing more and more frustrated. His arms grew tired, but the master simply watched in silence. Finally, Hiro stopped and exclaimed, "Master, what is the point of this? The water is only getting more chaotic." The master smiled and said, "Now sit and watch." Hiro sat by the pond, still breathing heavily from his efforts. Slowly, the water began to settle. The ripples faded, and the surface became still once more. The reflections of the sky and trees returned, as clear and perfect as before. The master spoke softly. "Your mind is like this pond. When you try to control it with force, you only create more chaos. But if you allow it to settle on its own, it will find its natural state of peace." Hiro frowned. "But how do I stop the thoughts from coming? They feel endless." The master picked up a small pebble and tossed it into the pond. A single ripple spread across the surface, but the water soon returned to stillness. "Thoughts are like ripples," the master said. "They will come and go. You cannot stop them, but you do not have to cling to them. Observe them without judgment and let them pass." Hiro sat in silence, watching the pond. For the first time, he noticed how the wind occasionally stirred the water, but the pond always returned to stillness. He began to understand. The master continued, "To control your mind is not to force it into submission. It is to cultivate awareness. When a thought arises, acknowledge it, but do not let it carry you away. Return to your breath, to the present moment. In time, the mind will settle on its own." Hiro spent the next few weeks at the monastery, practicing the master's teachings. He sat in meditation each day, observing his thoughts without judgment. At first it was difficult. His mind wandered constantly, and he often felt frustrated. But slowly he began to notice moments of stillness, like the calm surface of the pond. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Hiro approached the master. "Thank you," he said. "I am beginning to understand. The mind is not something to be controlled, but something to be understood." The master nodded. "Remember, Hiro, the pond does not struggle to be still. It is still by nature. Your mind is the same. Peace is not something you need to create. It is something you need to uncover." Hiro returned to his village with a new perspective. Whenever he felt overwhelmed by his thoughts, he would remember the pond and allow his mind to settle on its own. Over time, he found a deep sense of peace that he had never known before. And so, Hiro learned that the key to controlling the mind is not to fight it, but to understand it. By cultivating awareness and letting go of the need to control, he discovered the stillness that had always been within him. This story reminds us that peace is not found by battling our thoughts, but by observing them with compassion and allowing them to pass. Like the pond, our minds have a natural tendency toward stillness. We need only to let it be.